So before we start this particular video, I wanted to actually talk about a very small thing. So this video is going to actually help you understand a real system design interview scenario. We are going to try to mimic a 45 to 60 minute kind of like a round where we are going to solve a problem very similar to how you will solve a similar system design problem in this short time frame. Now, of course, when you work as a software engineer in a company, you have relatively larger amount of time and you can do a lot of more deep dives in even very small level features. But in an interview, the temperament is different, the approach is different, and a similar scenario is actually explained in this particular video. So do consume the content based on that. Also, if you want to see more deep dives and want to understand these topics in a much more deeper level concepts, then do check out the link in the description section below for our system design 2.0 cohort, where we have talked about a lot more concepts in a lot more detail, which will make you definitely a better software engineer. So let's just start the video.
Hey, hi, hello, Ria. Welcome to your system design round.
Hello, thanks, Ankit.
Yeah, are you ready? Shall we start?
Yes, we can start.
Cool. So let's first of all discuss about the problem. So what I would like you to do today is I would like you to actually think about a system which can be used to serve feed, like a news feed or let's say social media feed to the users of a platform, something very much similar to LinkedIn feed, right? Where people are posting about different things and the people who are actually consuming the feed can see the feed and interact. Very similar to something like a Facebook feed or let's say a news feed, something like that. So that's what's the expectation today.
Okay, got it. Just before I start, you can see my screen, right? Whatever I'm typing also.
Yes, everything is properly visible.
Got it. Okay. So I think you have given me to design like a feed service. So we have feeds like for Instagram, for Facebook, for LinkedIn, and it's more like I believe you're looking more for like a scrolling feed, right? Which sort of is kind of like a scroll.
Yes,
And if I
yes.
want
Just
to
like how
see
in
as
social
many
media it
posts.
works.
Correct. Okay. So I think first I will start with functional requirements and then we will take our way from there. So for functional requirements, first I think I would like to have the capability to create a post. Okay, I'm calling whatever we are posting over here, whatever feed that is generated is basically an accumulation of posts by different people. So here I'm calling it a capability where a person is able to create a post. And then other capability I'm thinking we can add is to see posts. So when I see post, basically I will have a generated feed and I would be able to scroll through that generated feed. So that is another capability. And as like a sub point of this capability as well, I would like to return the users the feed in like a reverse chronological order. So basically, like if something is posted like with the latest, I would ideally want it to come at the top, is what I'm thinking right now. And I think, yeah, we can basically start with this functional requirements. If you would like me to add something, I can add. But yeah, I think for a feed generation, I think these looks like one of some of the most important capabilities I would like to add.
Yep, this looks good. I believe in the interest of time, these two should be the main features that we should focus on. Yeah, we can go ahead.
Got it. Okay, so I think I will talk a bit about the non-functional requirements too, a bit. Um, so in terms of non-functional requirements, I would like, because let's say if I take the example of Instagram, the whole posting process and even the whole feed generation process is pretty fast, even for people who are logging in for the first time in the platform after a long period of time, and even the people who are frequent users of the platform. So I would ideally want that both the process of creating posts and the feed generation process should be pretty fast. So ideally, I would like it to be less than 500 milliseconds. So ideally, we can think of something like that. And with this, I think we'll have to keep a couple of scaling factors in mind also, so that the overall process is very fast, specifically for the feed generation process, considering that a person could have a lot of people they follow and along with those lines.
Okay. One question that I have here is like what's the thing with this number of 500 milliseconds? Like why we have just kept this number? Any specific reasons?
No, I have just so for here I've not had any, like I've not done any major estimate calculations. I have basically kept in mind reflecting on how actually the services work and how fast the process is over there. So keeping in mind, I have selected this number over here. We can obviously like maybe change it if the user scope changes. So currently I've kept in mind that we could have, let's say, a DAU of, let's say, 1 million daily active users over here, and keeping that in mind, I've kept it as 500 milliseconds.
Okay, fair point.
Okay. All right. So I think once, since the expectations are clear over here, I can move to the next part, which is to define the entities for our system. I think in this case, the entities should be fairly straightforward. We will have a user entity, basically anybody who's, following anybody on the platform, for example, on Instagram, and being followed on the platform will be our user. And the other entity over here is going to be post. So there's going to be a user entity and there's going to be a post entity in this case. And with that, I will define the APIs in our systems also, keeping these two entities in mind. So the first would be to create posts. So we can have something like /API over here /post. So this could be, I would say, this could be a post API over here, where in the request, I am basically passing on the content of the post. So we can have, when we are posting something, we can have different, I would say, type of post, right? We can have, I would say, post related to text, images, videos. For the sake of simplicity, I've just kept it, let's say, a textual post. Obviously, we can
Fair
have
point.
videos and photos also integrated. Then
Sure.
we over here, then there's going to be, so here this is going to be the I would say the request body, and in the response body we can basically have I would say like a post ID which is being returned to us in the response. So that is one thing. The second thing we can do is to get feed or get post rather over here, get feed or anything we can call it. In that case, I can make it a simple get API where we can do /API/feeds. And then basically we are, since it's a get API, so we are not going to have any in the request body. We will simply be able to, let's say, get a JSON over here, which is going to have the contents of the feed, which is we are what going to display. So
Okay,
yeah, I
fair
think
point.
based on our requirements, these are the two, I would say, APIs that we can build.
Okay. Just one question here in the APIs part, because the post is going to be created by the user, how you are planning to pass on which user is going to create the post?
So basically, I think there are aspects over here about the user. So for authentication, one thing over here is we can pass on in the headers, right? And we can also for the authorization part, we can be passing a tokens in the header. Another part is
Fair
which
point.
user is basically going to be doing this. We can also be passing ideally the user ID over here explicitly, or I think in the part of token itself, we can be passing that as well,
Yeah.
just to maintain the fact that we don't want to release the user credentials and details.
Yeah. Yeah. Token makes sense. Cool. Yeah. We can skip that part. Yeah. I just wanted to get the clarity there. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So I will work on the design part now. So for the design part specifically, my bad. So for the design part, first I am just building a design which will take care of the functionalities as such without keeping the scalability factor in mind. First, I just want to make sure that whatever functional requirements, that we have, I just fulfill those first. And while doing that, I will be aware that it may not be the most optimized way to complete those functional requirements. But once I have a basic overlay setup, then I will go ahead and work on the part of optimizing these functional requirements so that the non-functional requirements are being taken care of. So that is what I'm basically thinking. So the first thing that I will be doing over here, is taking care of the create posts part. So we can assume over here that we have a user. Okay, and here I have API gateway. So you can assume API gateway over here to take care of multiple things like throttling, and it will also act as a load balancer for us if we want, and it will take care of all these things of redirecting the request to the right gateway also. So basically, I'm going to be starting with this. So we have a user who's going to take the request. For example, it's this is going to be part, and you can assume that here we have, let's say, our post API for API slash post, and they would like to post something. And behind this, I would basically have a post service, which will basically getting the request from the API gateway. And for the sake of simplicity, like I said, initially I'm going to just assume that there is just going to be a post DB over here, which is going to store the information about the post that is being generated by the user. Okay, I know this is not scalable. We cannot just have like a simple post DB over here to fulfill our use cases. But again, like I said, for the sake of simplicity, I have just kept it like this, and I will come back to this and scale it later in this case. So yes, I think this is, so basically what we are doing is we are making an insertion call to the post DB to fulfill our use case over here of how a person should be able to create a post in this case.
Got it.
Next part will be to see feeds. So when a person basically wants to see the feeds from the people they follow, it is basically a 3-step, I would say, process over here. The first will be that you want to get the list of, so I will break it down, the process, in 3 parts. First, you want to get the list of all the people basically a person follows, right? And then you want to get the list of posts those people have actually made. And then I'm going to sort those posts by time. That is very easy when we are dealing with databases over here. And then we can just return it to the user. So I will break it down. So A part would be to get the list of all rents. Then the B part would be over here to get all the posts of those friends or followers, anybody who's there, and then return the posts in the desired order to the user over here. So I think this is what basically I'm going to break down the whole process in this case. So if I take this system only and consider it over here, and let's say I drag it over here, I want to like add more components to the system itself. Now, if I do that, I will basically be adding another service over here, which will be the feed service. Now, basically what will happen is a user will be making another request, let's say slash API slash feed, and then the request will basically be directed to the feed service, who is basically going to take care of the fact how the feed is basically going to be generated for us. And then once the feed is basically for generating the feed, we will first need to, like I said, step is going to be get the list of all the friends. So for that, I'm going to keep a graph DB over here, which is an
Can you please scroll
optimized
up a bit? Can
database.
you please scroll up a
One
bit?
second. Yeah. So I'm going to keep a graph DB over here, which will basically get the list of all the friends. So this is essentially, let's say, the step one for me. I'll just, yeah, this is step one for me to basically get the list of all the friends. Now, once I have the list of all the friends, then I am going to basically go to the post DB to basically get the list of all the posts that those friends have basically created. And then the feed service is basically going to take care of the responsibility of returning it back to the user based on the requirement. So I think here this is kind of like a double arrow over here. I can draw it just over here. I can decrease the width. One second.
You want to put an arrow?
Yeah, I want to put a double-sided arrow in this case.
Yeah, I guess there's no support for double-sided arrow. But yeah, you can just put a straight line that can help us to understand.
I'm putting just another arrow over
that
here
works. Yeah, that works.
just to show that this is a double-sided direction in this case. I think I have taken the opacity. That's why this is coming as this color. Yeah, so this is
Yeah.
more like a double-sided arrow to represent that once the feed is generated, we are going to return it back to the user. So I think, yes, this is more like, I would say, satisfying all the functional requirements for us, at least initially, and helping us generate the feed. Do you have any questions so far? Then I will go on and expand these model further.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions here. First is like, you said that the post service is going to add the data in the post DB. So how the post DB is gonna look like? First thing. Second thing is like, what kind of a system you are expecting this to be like? For example, for post service is kind of like writing in the post DB. Feed service is kind of like querying the data from the post DB. So I
Correct.
believe like if we can have some discussion on the nature of post DB, how the post DB looks like, that can be good. Second question is like, why you have kept a graph DB here? Any specific reasons of you using the graph DB to get the list of friends? Would we be able to do it without graph DB also, or like what's the reasoning behind this choice? If we can talk a bit about the DB, and again, as you mentioned that this fulfills a functional requirement, that's a fair point, but I believe we won't be able to scale it up much. And as far as I can see that the services you are representing a single instance running. So how the scaling aspect will work, I guess we can start taking a deep dive into all these 2-3 aspects.
Got it. Okay, so I think I'll start with the graph DB question first. So over here, the reason why we are picking graph DBs is because graph DBs are very optimized for storing relationships. For example, there's a very popular graph DB, which is Neo4j, which is optimized for storing relationship. And considering all social media applications, it is essentially what we store relationships over here about one person following the other, and that relationship could be unidirectional or bidirectional. So in that case, graph DBs are pretty optimized over here. So if I want to, let's say, have a person A and I want to know the list of all the people that they follow, so graph DBs have very optimized query languages available, which can help us to, do queries over here. So I think that's why that is one of the reasons I have picked a graph DB over here. Another question you had was, do we need only graph DBs over here? And I think, would nothing else work in this case? I think the answer is yes, we can use other options also. For example, we can have DynamoDB over here. I think DynamoDB can also be optimized. Not sure if it's going to be very optimized, but it can definitely be used to store relationship. So in DynamoDB, we can have a key value store, kind of like a thing we can store. So essentially, if I, let's say, go with DynamoDB DB, what I could essentially do here was I could store like a key value mapping of user following to user followed. So I can store something like that. And that also will help us to represent the relationships over here in this case. So I think using DynamoDB over here also looks like a fair choice. I have picked GraphDB over here, considering it's slightly more, I think, favorable for representing relationships.
Do you think like maybe using a simple SQL, something like MySQL or PGSQL would also help, or that's not a choice for us? What do you think?
I think we can. I won't say that it's very unoptimized in this case or something like that. We can definitely go for options like that also. But yeah, I also feel that at the same point, we do have specific DBs available which are optimized for use cases like this. And if considering the scale of the application having 1 million DAU, and also we'll see later how the scaling aspect does rely on GraphDB a lot for generating the feeds. In those cases, I have specifically preferred over here GraphDB.
Fair point. Okay, sure.
Yeah, and yes, I think the scaling factor that you kept in mind is, I think, fairly true. That
we can talk about the post DB. What should be the nature of the post DB? Just maybe a good overview should help, and then we can talk
so
about
I think on the post,
scaling aspect.
like I said, a post can be of multiple types, videos, and I think
We are taking
audios.
content only. We are only taking
Correct.
content,
So
right?
in this case, essentially what happens is we don't really store the content as such in the post DB, right? We ideally just try to maybe store a mapping over here. For example, if I store the DB in, let's say, S3, right? Not store the DB, my bad. I would say store the actual content in S3. What here we essentially do in the post DB is that we just store a mapping of, let's say, the user who has actually created the post and some metadata about the post. For example, when the post was really created, what was the timestamp, and then some other details about the post. And then along with that, we also store the link to the post in the post DB itself. And then that link is basically a link to S3, where if you want the whole details of the post, you should be able to fetch.
Why do you want to store the content? Because I can see content is a text content. Why do you want to store the text content of the post in S3? Can we not store
Yes, I
directly in
think
a database?
Yes, I think my idea more was along the fact that, if we scale it further, then we would need, let's say for storing videos and audios, we would need S3. If we are just putting down our scope for the sake of just content, and when I say content in terms of only the form of text, then we may not need to use S3 in this case. That would be sort of like a overkill in this scenario. I think simply storing it in the DB itself over here, maybe in the form of like the SQL, and then in the SQL, we do have the option to store JSONs, and in the JSON, we have inside like a text format over here. That should suffice also our use case over here as well. Okay, so now knowing that we have a better idea for the post DB over here, I think what we can go ahead with any, I think NoSQL DB fits well over here. So essentially, what we would like to store is if it's a post DB and let's say a new post is created, we would ideally like to have the user ID stored, and then the contents of the post obviously will be coming over here in the form of a JSON. And then along with that, we can also store some metadata related to the post, right? Now with metadata, we can store the number of likes on the post, when the post was basically created, time stampings and everything, we should be able to store over here. I think the reason why I have preferred a NoSQL DB over here is because a person can create multiple posts, right? And in future, if we would like to fetch all those posts, I think NoSQL DB would be very optimized. We could be very easily do partitioning in terms of the user ID, and then the fetching process also would be quite faster in this case. So yeah, I think this is the reason I would go with a NoSQL DB for the post DB over here.
Okay, fair point.
All right. Yeah, I think now for the scaling part, your concern is absolutely fine that this product will obviously not scale for the amount of users that we're looking to tackle. So that's why what we're going to do is we're going to deep dive further and see how we can basically make this process faster. So for the create post part, ideally, I would say this is more like a feed publishing kind of like a process where we are trying to create posts and then basically make sure it reflects in people's feed. And then the C feeds process is basically like a news feed building process over here where we are building the feeds for the user. So I think when I will try to optimize this process of feed publishing, one of the bottlenecks over here that will come is that for users which have a large number of followers, right? And then let's say they post something, okay? And then I will have to make sure that the feed of so many people actually gets updated, right? And then let's say if I am generating feed on the real time over here, right? So in my particular process, if you will see, what I'm actually doing is whenever there is actually a request to generate the feed, I am generating the feed at that point of time only, which is not very optimized. So what we would do it, we would actually have a news feed already pre-generated over here. So this is more like a pre-generated feed, which we are going to store in the cache over here. Okay, so that is one thing that we are going to rely on. Now, in this case also, like I said, pointed out that there is a problem of even if I keep a news feed which is pre-generated, right, for let's say all the users, even then what may happen is, let's say there is somebody who's very famous, right, and they post something, they have like millions of followers. I will have to update the feed of all those particular people who they follow, right, and then their feed has to be generated. So it could take a lot of time, and it could be a problem which is popularly known as the fan out problem over here as well. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm going to use I'm going to solve this fan out approach by basically integrating two models together. One is going to be a push model and one is going to be a pull model. So my concern is that there are multiple different type of people, I think, on social media. One which do have like a lot of followers and they're very active, and one who do not have a lot of followers and they don't even open their feed that frequently. So basically, I will have
I have a question here. I have a question here. We can resume from the DB pulling and pushing model that you mentioned. But when you said that you are going to pre-prepare the feed, so does that mean that, for example, let's say I have a friend and they posted something. So do you think because of this pre-preparation technique, do you think there might be a scenario that if, let's say, my friend posted a new post just now, and at the same time, let's say in a second or two, I refreshed my feed, then I may not see their latest post, and maybe after 2 3 refreshes I see their post. Do you think this kind of scenario might happen in your approach?
Yes, I think like I mentioned in the start as well, what I am targeting is eventual consistency. I'm not targeting that, once somebody posts something, immediately it should come on my feed. I'm targeting eventual consistency, that it may not come immediately in your first set of, let's say, 500 feeds that I pick up for to be generated for you. It may not come immediately that at that point of time, probably in the next 2 or 3 refreshes, but that post should definitely be coming on your feed.
Okay, so we are targeting eventual consistency
Eventual
here.
consistency over here. Yes.
Okay, fair point.
All right.
Yeah, we
I
can
think for
continue
the
from
feed
the
publishing part,
push.
like I mentioned, that so we will have a push model over here, and then I will have a pull model over here as well. So when I talk about the push model is for basically the majority of users that actually use our social media. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a fan out write approach. So when I talk about fan out write, that means that I am going to generate the feed when it is actually being requested, right? Which is going to happen for the majority of users because they're regular users. I want their feed to be generated pretty quickly. But I'm going to use the pull model for, let's say, celebrities over here, right? Because celebrities, like I said, whenever they post something, they have millions of followers. I cannot just go ahead and update the feed so quickly for all those people that actually follow them, and it's going to be very high heavy on the system also. So celebrities with a lot of followers, I'm going to use the concept of pull content on demand. So when actually somebody, let's say, logs in after some time, and when they actually want their feed to be generated, I will generate their feed on the read basis rather than on the write basis. So I think this is a difference in approach that I'm going to
So you're
follow,
saying
and more
pull
like a
model
hybrid
will be
approach.
for celebrity related posts, Like maybe let's
Yes,
say Elon Musk posted something, and push
correct,
model is for like general friends, like the friends maybe let's say I have on the platform. For them, you want
correct,
to have a push model. Can you elaborate both these
correct.
model, like how they're going to maybe work?
Okay, so when in terms of elaboration, what expect like a specific part would you like to
Like can
understand
you
over
show
here?
like how this fan out right will work? When you said fan out right, I didn't get the clarity. What do you mean by fan out right? Like how exactly this fan out right will work? Can you maybe show this?
Okay, so would you like me to like integrate it in my design itself and then explain? Would that be
Yeah, yeah,
okay?
yeah. That's the expectation. Yeah.
Okay, so I think let's say I pick up this existing design itself. I will copy this. Okay, so here the normal part of actually the feed getting generated will remain the same of how we are calling a post API, and then the post service is going to I make sure that your post actually persists. Along with that, I am going to introduce a fan out service over here. Okay, which is going to be like a asynchronous process. So whenever some post is actually created by a particular user asynchronously, this fan out service is also going to, I would say, become active, right? And this is basically going to make sure of the part I was basically talking about. So there are multiple steps over here. Whenever I want to make sure I update the news feed of, let's say, a certain group of people and I have posted something, first, I would like to know who all those people are whose feed needs to be updated. So I would be making a first call to GraphDB. And then sometimes this is the optional process. What happens is you don't want the post that you created to be visible to everybody. Maybe you have some close friends feature like there's on Instagram or any other platform. In case you want your post to be optionally seen to a few people. So for that, we can have the user DB itself, which is going to store the user detail. We can basically have some flags in that DB, which will basically check that the post needs to be seen by this particular friend or not. So we can add those flags. Once now I have the updated list of people who's actually going to be able to see the post, then I'm going to introduce and update the newsfeed cache. Okay. Now in this process also, updating the newsfeed cache can be again a very heavy process because I have to update the people feed of my friends, and there would be so many people posted. So to optimize the process further, I'm going to introduce a message queuing mechanism over here, where I'm going to, in a queue basis, update all the posts. Let me just like draw it down nicely so that everything is more visible. So the first
Sure.
request, I'll be numbering it down also. So the first request basically will go to the GraphDB to get the list of all the friends. Essentially, optionally, you could also be making a request to the user DB also. Let's say I draw the user DB over here. Okay, I can also be using a user DB over here if I just want to update the list of friends based on any priority. Now, once I do that, I basically know who all needs to be having my updated feed. Now, I am going to introduce
So this fan out, so like when somebody creates a post, that call is going to go through post service to the post DB. After that, this fan out service is going to come into the picture, right?
yes, yes,
Who
it is
will
going to
call
come
this
into
fan
the.
out service? Is the post
So
service going to
we
call this fan out?
I think essentially we would like this fan out service to be called asynchronously. So the moment a post is basically generated, I would want this fan out service to asynchronously pick up that post and do the part of updating the newsfeed cache.
Okay, so because you have put an arrow from gateway to the fan out service, so that made it confusing. So you're saying
Yes,
that once a post has been successfully created, then you would like your fan out service to come into the picture and like do
correct.
the stuff that you want. So I would like you to
Yeah.
complete this part, but then maybe we can also explore that. Should this call, like how this call to fan out service goes, we can then explore that. But let's first complete the flow that you are mentioning.
Okay, so we first have the user DB, which is activated over here. Like I said, if I optionally want to get more details, then I'm basically going to pass this to the message queue. So for the message queue, it's basically going to be something like a post ID over here. And with the post ID, I would also like to send the updated friends list over here, for which all the news feed cache is basically going to be updated. So I have the post ID, I have the updated friends list, I would say also, for which I would like the feed to be updated. Now, once I am putting, I would say my request in the queue, I would have something like fan out workers. Okay, so the fan out workers are basically going to pick the requests from the message queue, and then accordingly they would be updating the newsfeed cache. So then we have later something like newsfeed cache over here, which is going to be updated. And this newsfeed cache is basically, let's say it could be something like this. It could be post ID to like a user ID, kind of like a cache. So basically, I am already getting the post ID, and then I'm going to get the updated friends list also. And this newsfeed cache could store a mapping like post ID to user ID. And then the fan out workers are going to make sure that this newsfeed cache is basically generated for all those friends who would like to see the post that is being created by this user. So essentially, this is what I would want my,
So
this is
you
what
you
I
are
would
you are
essentially
going
want my fan out service to do.
Yeah, so two questions here. First is your fan out workers. So will you keep a single worker here to take care of all the fan out like processing of the message queue?
Okay, so yes, I think you're right. Over here, since it's a message queue and we want to make sure that our application is scalable, what we can do is we can horizontally put like more fan out workers over here as well, which will take care of the fact that there's only not one fan out worker and it's not overloaded, and we can introduce more. So I have added over here a couple of more like these to show that we will be scaling the part of fan out workers.
Okay, fair point. And this news feed cache, I believe you're using this news feed cache to store the feed of a user, right? You just said that
Correct.
you're going to store the post ID, user ID. Can you elaborate on the structure, like how this news feed cache is going to work and how we will
Okay,
query this? Like, if you can elaborate on
got
that.
it. So I think we are clear to the part of this part of how the message queue will basically take the post ID of the post which is created by the user and update it friends list, right? Now let's say I want to fetch a particular, I would say the feed of one of those friends, although I am going to talk about it later in the feed
No,
generation
let's
part
first
also,
talk
but
about
I
how we will store. How we will store. Fetching we can talk
got
later.
it.
Generation,
Okay,
how we will
so
store
over
it straight away.
here, what we can actually do is, let's say I have over here user ID. So since it's a cache, I will be storing a user ID. That will be the key of the cache. And in the values, I am basically going to store a array. Now this array is basically going to be a tuple. Now this is going to be post ID to user ID over here. And then let's say, because it's a pre-generated feed, essentially now this could be post ID 2,
Another post
and
ID.
then
Okay.
it could be another, user ID. And over here, essentially moving like this, let's say I am storing 1,000 of, let's say the first 1,000 posts of for this particular user ID, which will contain the post that needs to be displayed to the user. And also along with that, I'm extra storing the information of the person who has actually created that post also. So this is how I'm thinking to store the information in the newsfeed cache.
Okay. Fair point.
Okay,
Cool.
so I think yes,
Also,
this is
the question that was pending here, that from the post service, you are going to now call the fan out service, which is going to put the data in the message queue by fetching the friend list, and then fan out workers will one by one update your feed. So this
correct.
call from post service to fan out service, how this is going to facilitate? Like, for example, are you going to wait for the post DB response to come back to the post service, and then you are going to maybe feed the data in the fan out service? So do you think that is going to cause any problems? Because what I can see is that we can have a lot of post creation requests also. So the fan out service will be bombarded unnecessarily because we do not want immediate consistency, right? So do you think like making a direct synchronous call here is going to help? Like if you can just give a bird's eye overview also, that should also help in the interest of time.
Got it. So I think what I would ideally like to do is initially I was thinking we can go ahead with like a asynchronous call over here itself. That should be triggering the fan out service, and then the whole process for fan out service can go. Also knowing that again, a one person on an average, let's say make 5 posts a day if it's applications like Twitter where people post very frequently. What we can also do is we can introduce a message queue over here as well, wherein let's say whenever there is a post actually generated, we put that acknowledgement that something with this particular post ID for the user ID has basically been posted, and then the fan out service can basically pick up, or the fan out over here, another workers can basically pick up from that message queue and then inform the fan out service that the post has successfully been created, and based on that we should be updating our news feed cache over here.
Okay, fair point, fair point.
Okay. So I think I've not added that part over here. If you want, I can add it for the sake of
No, I guess
simplicity
you
of
can
our
skip
systems
that, but
over
yeah,
here.
I got the idea. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so I think this is what pretty much the concept of feed publishing part over here as well. I think by having pre-generated feed, you will see that later. Now I will show that how considerably it will decrease our and make our easier process for the feed generation part as well. So in the
Okay.
feed generation part. So for the feed generation part, what essentially I'm going to do is just to give a high level overview, and then I will show it later also. So if it's a get request to generate the feed, now the API gateway is going to redirect our request to the feed service, which is it already doing as well. And now we are basically going to interact with the news feed cache. So this was our earlier way of doing stuff, which obviously was not very optimized. So what we are going to do is first, so the request will come over here for the feed generation. It will go to the feed service. And now later what I am going to do is it there a possibility to draw like a, okay, I'm making a direct arrow over here.
You can take an arrow. You can take an arrow, click somewhere below on the blank side, yeah, and then make it a curve.
Got it. Okay. So over here, what I'm going to do is now the feed service is directly going to interact because we do have pre-generated feeds. It is going to interact directly with the news feed cache, which is going to get us the list of all the post IDs and the people who created it. But along with that, that is not enough, because what actually happens is that, whenever you see post on your feed, it's not just posts, right? You also see a lot of information like who created that post, what's the content, what's the caption, and everything. So for that, I am also going to interact over here with the user DB also to get all the details related to that. So basically from the feed service, I will be interacting with the user DB also to get all those details. Now, once I have all those details over here, now actually I'm going to fetch that actual content information from the post DB. Let me know if that confuses you, and then I will add the numberings also. For example,
Yeah, we can add the numbering here. We can add the numbering here.
this was the first part, and then fetching the details from over here was the second part, and then getting the, once I have all the metadata related to post also, then I'm going to fetch the actual post content from the post DB, and then I'm going to return it back to the user. Initially we are, let's say we generate so although here for every user I'm going to generate, let's say 1,000 posts. Initially we could just return the first 500 posts to the user and their feed should be populated.
So let's say if the user is scrolling up the feed and you shared, let's say 100 posts instead of 500, let's say we shared 100 posts. So like how this API should look like? Do you think like in the API structure, because you, as far as I remember, the structure that we had was /API/feed, it's a GET request. So how will you know, let's say I made this query, like made this API call, I got the first 100 posts. Then I made this API call again. How do I know I need to get the next 100 posts? Like how will
Correct.
this
So I
will
think
facilitate with your
what you're
API
essentially looking at is kind of like a scrolling concept, which is essentially nothing but like a pagination concept, right? You would want the first 100 posts to be displayed, and when the person refreshes again, they should see the next 100 posts, right? And the newsfeed cache should be able to take care of that scenario also. That let's say if you have already shown the first 100 posts, now you want to display the next 100 posts only because the first 100 has already been returned as a response. I think to take care of that, we will have to introduce pagination over here. So considering over here newsfeed cache, we can introduce cursor-based pagination, wherein we will be knowing that the first 100, let's say we can obviously define what the number of posts we want to display in the first go, and then that could be like a number for us. And based on that, we can introduce cursor-based pagination on the newsfeed cache, so that when the next time the person make a request, we already have sort of that cursor defined at the 100 posts, let's say, and then we only return the next 100 posts to the user after that.
So can you write the API structure, like how the API structure should look like if you have to send this cursor?
Let's go back to the API itself. That will give us a better idea. I think you want to understand how we would change the API. For that, I would be making use of the query param itself. So it is limit, let's say, equal to 100, since you mentioned that we can have, let's say we want to display the first 100 one, and then we can have cursor over here. Now, I told you we are going to use cursor-based pagination, and the cursor over here is essentially going to be the timestamp for our case. So essentially, let's say for a particular day, you refreshed your feed at 5 p.m. and then you want to display only the post that. So that timestamp would go over here as a cursor. And then essentially you would be able to get the next set of feeds from the newsfeed cache over here for a particular
So then
post.
what I can see is that that particular timestamp also we might need to store in the newsfeed cache also, right? Otherwise, how will we know that, okay, which particular post had what timestamp? So I believe we can do that, or maybe a sequence number kind of like a thing also we can do that. With every tuple, we can have, let's say, sequence number, and then with that sequence number also we can use. But yeah, there can be different strategies to implement that. But yeah, I got the idea that you would like to use a cursor-based pagination. So finally, as far as I understand the flow is that your feed service is now, first of all, going to collect the news feed cache and let's say the next 100 post or whatever is your cursor-based pagination. Then it's going to go to the user DB, collect some data from the user DB about the user whose posts are there. And then in the third request, it is going to go to the post DB and get the
Post.
data of the post.
Correct.
Yeah. Just one last question. This step number 2 and step number 3, do you think we need to do it synchronous? Like first step number 2 should happen and then step number 3 should happen, or we can do it parallelly also? What do you think?
I
What's your
think we can do
take?
parallelly. They're not really dependent on each other. And the feed service already knows all the post IDs and as well as the user IDs. So we don't need to do both the processes synchronously. They can happen asynchronously at the same time.
Okay, fair point. And for the newsfeed cache, like what kind of a cache service like you are going to use? Do you do you want to use something like a Redis or something, or what are you
I
planning to
think
use?
Redis should fit our use case quite well over here.
Okay, fair point. Now, what I can see in the design is that let's say your post service and the feed service is like a single instance. So don't you think this can become a single point of failure? Like if we have a lot of requests coming up because we are looking at 1 million DAO, even like 10% of that is going to be pretty good. Do you think we will be able to handle it with a single instance here in the post service and the feed service?
No. I think when I'm designing everything over here in terms of post service and in terms of feed service, we would essentially obviously want that to be horizontally scaled. So there would be multiple instances of feed service everywhere at this point as well over here. So
Okay,
I
yeah,
think
you don't
just
need to
for
draw. I guess I just wanted to get the idea. You don't need to draw. You can remove these
got it.
boxes.
Okay.
Yeah. One last question. Like in Redis, because let's say we have 1 million daily active users. So if 1 million is the daily active users, I can assume that overall the number of users on our platform might be slightly higher, maybe 100
Mm-hmm.
million users maybe. So
Mm-hmm.
do you think if just a single Redis, because do you think just a single Redis instance should be, we should have to store the data of all the 100 million users? Because of course the DAO is lesser, let's say 10% of it, not even 10%, 1% of it. So, but do you think we should try to distribute the data in Redis also?
Okay, yes, I think your question is right. So what we can do is, since we are using Redis over here, and Redis does support sharding, we can create a distributed Redis cache over here where we'll be sharding it on the basis of user ID. So that will help us to make sure that the scalability factor of Redis is also being taken care of.
Yeah, makes sense, because we want to ensure like high availability. So that is going to be good. Yep. I guess those were my questions. Do you have any questions for me?
No, I
Again?
think I think based on the functional requirements, this is what as a model I can think of we can build.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, the design looks good. Thanks, yeah. Thanks for sharing your insights. Yep. Thank you.